Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, here in the room and also in the cloud. My name is Mark Salomon. I'm the Dean of the Business School, and it is a great honor for me to open today the Analytics for a Better World conference and also the initiative in general. The purpose of this conference is, of course, to celebrate the start of Analytics for a Better World, but also to inform NGOs, and I hope they are in large numbers present today, to show them how they could benefit from Analytics for a Better World, to invite potential partners to join, and later during the program we will explain how that works. And of course, to explain to the researchers and students how they could collaborate with this initiative. One note, we will take some pictures and we will put them on our social media. But if you don't like it, please let us know by raising your hand, or if you're in the Zoom by sending us a message via chat that you don't like that, then we don't take a picture of you. Now, I want to tell a little bit about the history of Analytics for a Better World. And this history started, in fact, with a vacancy that we had in the business school for a new professor in operations research. It was about 2 years ago. And we were so happy that we found Dick den Hertog as a candidate. In fact, it was the second time that I hired Dick, because I was before professor in Tilburg. And there I hired Dick also one time, but I was very happy to be able to do that. And when Dick came, he said to me, Mark, I see so many colleagues and students looking for real purpose. And can we do something? I want to set up a center to help to realize the Sustainable Development Goals. And yeah, we were thinking how to do that. A few months later, there was the finals of a big competition on applied research for NGOs. And that was for the United Nations World Food Programme. And Dick and a big team from Tilburg and from the United Nations World Food Programme were in the final, and they won the final. They won a big final in the US for the best application of operations research. And yeah, we thought, okay, maybe we should do a lot more things for NGOs. They could really benefit from that. And from there, more or less, this idea was born of Analytics for a Better World. And of course, people are always asking, how much are then the improvements if we help other companies? We have learned from commercial companies that the benefits for companies or NGOs could be in between 10 and 25% of costs of revenues improvement if you apply analytics. Now, the third element of the history of Analytics for a Better World was that we know our strengths and weaknesses as a university. And we have many strengths, of course, but we have also some weaknesses, and that is that we are not real implementers of things. So we can build a prototype, a nice model. We could solve that model. We could show the outcome, but we cannot so well embed it in operational systems. So we're looking for a co-founder of this initiative that could do that, that was really specialized in that. And we found Ortec. To be honest, I worked 30 years ago for that company. It was at that time 20 people, and it's now over 1,000 people, and they do nothing else than analytics and optimization. And we thought it would be an ideal partner to help us to implement our work. I contacted Michael and Frans. Michael is also here. There is Michael. Michael is the CEO of Ortec, and Frans is the CEO of the consulting business unit of Ortec. And they said immediately yes. I think within 5 minutes, we had a phone call, and they said, yes, this is really something that fits very well to our company as well. We are in. And Yeah, then we were, of course, looking also for a director of this initiative, and we found Robert, which I also knew for quite a longer time. He was also involved with UvA, and he's leading now the initiative, and so far very well, I think. Now, the fourth element of our history is Dimitri. Dimitri is a friend of Dick, and Dimitri is a professor in operations research at MIT. And to be honest, he is mentioned here at place number 4, but probably he should, together with Dick, be mentioned at place number 1, because they together discussed this idea also. They had something that was similar probably in mind as we are doing now. And Dimitri from MIT is also supporting, joining, and working with us on this initiative. And that gives it also a very nice international opportunity. Now also work in the US, for instance, and we have there a lot of support and people around at MIT. Now, ABW is open to the power 4. That's our business model, so to say. And open to the power 4 means open to new NGOs. So if NGOs want to work with us, please let us know. We are very happy to help you. And you could contact, for instance, Robert or me or Dick. We are really open to new NGOs to work with. Of course, we already have a number, but there can always be more, and we are very happy to help. Open to new partners, like Cortec is a co-founder, but we're also looking for other partners, and we have already some other partners in the pipeline. But if you want to become a partner in some way, I think that you could help in some way, we are very much open to that as well. Open to students and researchers. So if researchers want to work with us or students want to write a thesis or PhD thesis with us, that's also possible. And finally, also, our solutions will be open to other NGOs. So we will have a repository. Dick will probably tell a bit more about that. If a solution has proven its value to an NGO, we'll put it in some kind of GitHub so that other NGOs could also use it in some way. And that idea will also be discussed later on. Now, then a little bit about the program. This is the opening, of course. What is analytics for a better world and how will be discussed by Dick, Robert, and Dimitri after my opening. Then there will be presentations by people from the work, people that actually work in NGOs, like Eliane de Maat from Amsterdam Data Collective and from Disruptive Development. There will be a break. After the break, there will be the Red Cross presenting and the Zero Hunger Lab. And in the second breakout session, the World Bank and the United Nations Center for Humanitarian Data. And we'll end with some drinks. Okay, this was my talk. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you will enjoy and learn a lot this afternoon. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's really a pleasure for me to give this short talk. Almost a little bit emotional, because, you know, there's really a dream that comes true today, or maybe already in January when we started. And so I have thought about this already a long time, for many years. And I think I would like to discuss also with you that two books were really very influential for me. And that's the following book. So the first book is the book Excellence Without a Soul. So that is written by a Harvard dean. And the book is in fact about the fact that, although Harvard University is maybe the best university, or one of the best, in this book, the dean is criticizing education, because he say it's not that inspiring as we would expect. And what we miss is purpose. What we miss is meaning. And in fact, the book is also asking for more purpose, more meaning, also in education. So that influenced me a lot. And I decided from then on also to apply my techniques and my tools to societal problems, and also to incorporate that in my teaching. So that's the first book. The second book is Weapons of Mass Destruction. Weapons of Mass Destruction, and maybe you know this book written by Katie O'Neill, and that's about the dark side of data science. And I think this book is correct. It's true. I think it's also a good message. But I think it's also one side of the coin. And especially the other side, the positive part of data science, that is treated in the last chapter of the book. But I think most of the people, they only come in the middle of the book and not at the end. And so I decided also to do research and also in teaching on the positive side. And that was another stimulus for me to concentrate on analytics for a better world, analytics for sustainable development goals. And in fact, also the term ABW, Analytics for a Better World, came from this book, because in that book, she's writing about WMD, Weapons of Mass Destruction. So I thought it's good to also have a three-letter term. So ABW, Analytics for a Better World. Okay, so now I would like to discuss 3 reasons why I think it was nice, reasons why we initiated this center. I think Mark already mentioned some of them, but maybe it's good to repeat them. So the first reason, so I'm now on the why part. The first reason is that there's a huge potential for analytics to contribute to a better world. I think if you look at the industry, that's clear for industry, that data, that analytics has a big value. But that's not that clear for the NGOs. Why is that? Why do we use advanced analytics methods to, in fact, advise you for another movie maybe that is interesting for you? And why not using analytics to save lives, to reduce poverty, to reduce hunger? So that was for me a reason. If there's such a potential in, let us say, the NGO world, the SDGs, why should we not apply it there? The second reason why we set up this center is that I think this potential can only be exploited if we team up with not only universities, but also with industry. And that's exactly what we did together with Ortec. The reason for this is the following. So I think if you look at the scientific literature, there are hundreds of papers about these type of applications, analytics in the SDGs. But only a few of them are really implemented, are really useful, or have impact. The reason for that is, I think, is the following. So at the university, the aim is to publish. And not that much to really have impact. That costs much time, and it's not publishable, maybe, that effort. So therefore, I think we really need industry to really have impact. By the way, that's also why my title is not scientific director. That was my first suggestion, but Robert said, no. It should be science to impact director. And I really like this title. Okay, so that's the second reason. The third reason is what I discovered, also the students, but also my own children. I have 5 children, and I recognize that especially young people, they are really interested in to do things that are on purpose, that have a purpose, that are meaningful. And so that's also another reason why we set up this, this center, to really stimulate those young people, to not only students, but also PhD students and young researchers, to do research in this respect. And to applications where we can contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. So these are the three reasons, basic reasons, I think, why we set up this, center. Now, and if you talk about analytics for the better world, then of course, and also some people ask me, what is a better world? Yeah, you can have discussions on that for years and do nothing. But we decided just to define it very broadly, namely, better world are the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. It's broad, yes, but you know, it's at least widely accepted by, I think, most of the countries, by many companies. So that is in fact where we, how we more or less define a better world, the SDGs. I also have a flag with these SDGs, but I forgot to bring it with me. But okay, so that is in fact the SDGs. What I would like to do now is just to give you three examples of projects that has to do with analytics for a better world with the SDGs. So the first project is a very old one, very briefly. Then a second one we recently did. And then another one is we will start soon, I guess. Okay, so this is the first project, this optimization of the dike heights. So in fact, after I read the first book, the Excellence Without a Soul, I decided to also start a project in the direction of improving the world. So I decided, let's start close by. I'm living close to a river, a dike, and you know, I was also evacuated in the past because of a critical situation. So I thought there are many reasons for me to just work on this project. So optimization of the dike heights. So a project for the Dutch government, where the question is, the Netherlands is, in fact, 2/3 of the Netherlands is flood prone. And so it's protected by dikes and dunes and so on. And the question here is also taking into account the global climate change, what should be the optimal dike height now and in the future? Taking into account all these uncertainties that we have. So what we did is we applied analytics, prescriptive analytics, optimization. What we did for all the dikes in the Netherlands, we optimized the heights. And it was very successful, big impact. So we also discussed it with the Dutch government, even with Willem-Alexander. And finally, it was accepted and also is now stated in the law. And due to analytics, I think we are safer in the Netherlands, and especially where I live. You can imagine that I really optimized my situation, of course. Or to put it differently, if you compare it with a plan that they had and with the same safety, we saved almost 7 billion euros. Okay, so that is the project optimization with dike heights. So it's really an old one, but very successful. A lot of much impact. And you know, this is also very nice to have these type of projects and applications also in teaching. So I teach a first year's course, Analytics for the Better World, the same name. And so I include all those cases into that course, and the students, they really love it. Of course, I simplified a little bit because it's too difficult for them, but you know, at least the core is there. The second one that I would like to discuss is optimizing the geospatial healthcare accessibility. In fact, in this afternoon, Kai Keizers, and I think also Parvati, will tell more about this. So that's about optimizing the accessibility for healthcare, and especially here for Vietnam, the stroke centers. So in Vietnam, there are many deaths because, you know, people come too late to stroke center. So the idea is to add more stroke centers. But the question is, okay, given a number of stroke centers that you add, where to locate those new centers such that the benefit is maximized. We did a nice project there in Vietnam. And here you see in the blue are the existing stroke centers, and in red, the new proposed ones. And we not only did it for Vietnam, but also for Timor-Leste, where we optimized the locations of hospitals. And also Parvati did it for Nepal, where she optimized the locations for COVID test centers, labs. And so we're now building also a tool box that we can now apply to many other situations in other countries to optimize geospatial healthcare accessibility. And so it is a recent project, but I already included also in the course Analytics for the Better World. And also, yeah, this was very stimulating for those for the students. The third one, that's the last project. That's a new one, so we have to start. In fact, Friday we have a first meeting on this, or a second meeting, and that's for the ocean cleanup. The ocean cleanup is in fact trying to not only remove the plastic for the ocean, but also to prevent that new plastic is coming into the ocean. But it's about collecting, removing the plastic. And there the question is, how should the boats be steered in such a way that that you maximize, that you optimize the removal, and that you optimize it as much as possible. So that's a new project, and I'm really excited to start this project. Okay, so 3 projects, 2 books, 3 reasons, and 3 projects. 2, 3, 3. So in fact, Analytics for the Better World, that's about making impact on people, planet, and prosperity. Thank you very much. And I think now the next, shall I announce the next speaker? Yeah. So that's Dimitri. He's in Boston, so it was impossible for him to come. And also he was not able to participate now, but he has made a video, and the video will now be shown to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Dimitri Brachimas, and I'm a professor at MIT, and I would like to talk to you about the how and what for researchers. In my view, there are very significant opportunities of analytics for SDGs. One aspect is the use of multimodal data. As you will see in the applications I will be talking later in the presentation, there's data related to computer vision, in medical imaging, for example, language, medical reports, and tabular data, electronic medical records in the context of healthcare. There's availability of data in very large amounts in electronic form. And in the last 20, 30 years, there has been significant progress in computation, in optimization, machine learning, the key aspects of analytics that are being used in the world. So correspondingly, it is my belief that we can materially affect some of the pressing problems of our times, problems that Dick discussed in the SDGs in the prior part of the presentation. So in my view, utilizing analytics for impacting our world, some of our pressing problems, presents a very exciting future. So what have we planned? We have planned an ABW journal, Analytics for a Better World journal. So this would be an electronic only journal, publishing short papers, 10 pages or less. The emphasis is on impact and on work that either has been implemented or shows significant promise of being implemented. We expect very fast times, publishing times. From submission to acceptance, we expect about a month. So the editorial board decides within a month. This is not expected to go to reviewers, but rather an editorial board of experts in analytics will decide. Immediately after the paper is accepted, it will be appear in our journal website. And we also expect to institute the public dialogue in the journal website, in which authors and readers can discuss aspects of the paper online. It is our distinct hope that the paper will be a lively, it would create a lively dialogue that will elongate the duration of life of a paper and will generate new ideas and research. We also intend, as we have done during the pandemic, an ABW seminar. The seminar will meet every 2 months. It will be by Zoom. The emphasis is on impactful implemented work. Some of these presentations would lead to papers that we hope to publish in the ABW journal. And of course, we plan to advertise both the seminar as well as the journal in the social media. So what I was planning to do to conclude my presentation is to present to you some of the works that make me very excited about the future of ABW, at the platform we have. So one aspect of it is my group at MIT, we created what is called Holistic AI for Medicine, HAIM for short. HAIM is the Jewish word for life. And the idea is, as human doctors, utilize a variety of multimodal data, scans, X-rays, MRI scans, CT scans, etc., reports, radiology reports, doctor and nurses' notes, tabular data. And based on this information, human doctors make predictions and prescriptions regarding care. The way we have implemented it is that we utilize deep learning for a variety of these tasks. For example, we take medical image, we pass it through a neural network, and then just before we make a prediction for the neural network, we extract the features. The key aspect of neural networks is to extract features in a way that humans do not fully understand. And this type of embedding, together with the other embeddings coming from nodes and tabular data, as well as whatever information we have, we put them in a large vector, we pass it through a final neural network, and we make a prediction or prescription. We have utilized and currently working on a variety of medical conditions, predicting edema for stroke patients. This is when a stroke patient appears in the hospital, and we want to predict, based on the multimodal data I mentioned, whether or not the patient will have swelling in the brain, and the treatments has to be adjusted to whether we expect swelling or not. Or rapid response teams in hospitals, where we try to predict who will, in the next half a minute to a minute, will have a serious crisis, so that we can deploy rapid response teams, or to personalize heart surgery, personalized with a particular anatomic and genomic information for the patients. Another topic of interest is personalized agriculture for farmers. And the idea is to build an application, which we have made a significant progress on, as you will see on the right, in which we utilize satellite data as well as data from the ground to make predictions regarding yield as well as revenue for farmers, and decide, or help the farmers decide, the crop rotation strategies, the vegetation index, comparison with neighboring fields, as well as information and suggestions regarding insurance and financing for farmers, in such a way that the overall uncertainty of farming can be reduced, and farmers are faced with a more prosperous future. So the Keren app is in use in Morocco, and we're also expanding our applications in the rest of Africa. Another aspect of our work is to predict hurricane intensity as well as the direction of the hurricane using 3 sources of data. Tabular data, which involves location information, pressure and temperature information, forecasting data from other typically partial differential equation predictions, the classical approaches that have been used for over a century for predicting hurricanes, as well as vision data. This is reanalysis maps from the hurricane. And utilizing all this multimodal data, we have developed an approach based on transformers, an architecture for deep learning that makes predictions that are at least comparable and often better than the current state of the art. We hope that this will be utilized in around the world when it's become more readily available. We recently published a paper in a top meteorological journal that illustrates these ideas. Finally, this is based on some work I've done about 5 years ago on how to route buses for schools that take into account preferences of students and schools, the health of students, trying to be equitable as well as minimizing cost. This is a complex discrete optimization model that we have implemented in Boston. And in the last couple of years, we have expanded its use in some of the major cities in the United States, more than 20. But overall, you see the combination of optimization and machine learning that makes me very excited about the future of applying analytics to improve our world. Thank you.
Right. As I think Dick said as well, this is also a very, very big dream for me to stand here. It's really something that I did already back in my thesis days. I wrote about information integration in Bangladesh floods, and now learned about analytics at Ortec, and now come back to this field. Really applying analytics for a better world is something that's really close to my heart, and I'm really proud of in pursuing. And I'm very open to start collaborating with all of you, like Mark said. So if you want to reach out to us, find me, and look forward to meet up also in the drinks. And I will share after Mark and Dick discussed about why we launched ABW and the history of it. Dimitri discussed the how for researchers and how researchers can contribute. And I will share about what both companies and nonprofits can benefit from analytics for a better world, but also what they can contribute to analytics for a better world. And I'll start off with the nonprofits. So I think it's really vital that we combine our joint forces, so nonprofits, researchers, and companies, in order to create more impact on the sustainable development goals. So from the company side, and we are very open to companies joining, they will bring their analytics implementation capabilities and their training capabilities in order to help nonprofits and help researchers create more impact with their work. We need researchers for finding new and novel analytics techniques and their ability to teach and teach about the art of the feasible for nonprofits. And we obviously need nonprofits for their domain knowledge and their access to the problem space and their access to beneficiaries and their large networks, their large global networks. So I think really bringing these three together in this institute and collaborating with each other will bring really big value on the sustainable development goals. There are a couple of things that we are going to do. So Dimitris talked about the research side. So you see 3 blocks related to that. So the journal, research, and the meetups. I will not be covering these, but I will be covering the academy, the project side, and the repository. So for the Academy, we're going to offer 3 distinct tracks, one for executives, so for the leaders of NGOs and then non-profits, one for management, more the translator role, so who are a bit closer to the data science teams, and one for hands-on specialists, so one for people that are actually cleaning data and creating value with data. The first edition is going to start in October for the hands-on specialists. So everybody at the NGOs find us on our website and subscribe. Parvati is currently working on the curriculum, and we will get started in October. And also no catch there, but we are offering it for free for our non-profit partners for everybody. So that's I think a really cool and great initiative. And why is it free? Because it is supported by our academic partners and by our private partners. So they are sponsoring people and content to, in fact, provide these courses. They will be centered around non-profit use cases. So to make it really relatable for people at non-profits, we integrate the cases. So for example, the cases that Dick and Dimitris shared about. We will really make it inspirational and teaching the art of the feasible, right? So teaching people that they can do their own projects, find their own use cases, and then make their own implementations of analytics. Then for projects, so in projects, we will help the nonprofits in solving their challenges by applying advanced analytics. For example, like the examples that Dick and Dimitris gave, and also the examples that will come after us. So in the breakouts, there are also, I think, really great examples of how analytics can be of value for a better world and for the SDGs. So how do these projects work? So we're going to start with ideation sessions. So really finding how and where the value can be most easily captured and where the biggest value is on this SDGs by applying analytics. Then we support with assessments and capability building. So really creating the environment within NGOs and nonprofits in order to be successful, so that you will not become dependent only of analytics for a better world, but that you will also be able to apply analytics yourself afterwards, and that we jointly accelerate more the efforts than that you are, as I said, become dependent. We do these projects together. So we're going to collect data, we're going to find the right data, we're going to build the models, build the dashboards together, and implement the results. So this is, again, back to the research and business part, so really going all the way from research into implementation. And in order to contribute to these SDGs. Then the last one on the top, the repository. So really high in our value is that we want to share everything that we develop also with other NGOs to benefit from. So a GitHub repository can also see a slow death because nobody looks at it, right? So we really need to stimulate that and focus on that. And I think one already cool example is that the work that Parvati and Dick have been doing by the World Bank through our repository is also going to be used, I think, in next week. Where are you? With Jacopo, with the 510 Red Cross team. So I think that's already a really cool example of the value of such a repository and how it can create value in multiple ways. Okay, so how to collaborate then as an NGO or as a nonprofit? There are basically 3 ways. So you can invite us for an exploration workshop where we will jointly brainstorm about the opportunities of analytics for you and what the possibilities are. Find funding together, for example. As mentioned, you can learn analytics through our academy, really starting for yourself. I think a really powerful way to increase your impact, and obviously join our ecosystem and spread the word. Stay updated, get inspiration. We launched our website last week with all case studies and examples that we have. So I think it's worth the read. We will also start uploading the meetups, the results of the meetup. All the talks of today will be on there, for example. We will continue posting there. And if you want to reach out to us personally or to our inbox, go to hello@analyticsbw.org, and you will end up in my mailbox, and I will get back to you to organize something. All right. second part of my presentation about companies. So how can companies benefit and contribute to analytics for a better world? I think there are maybe, so I think we discussed more or less a bit on what are the benefits for nonprofits, but maybe what are the benefits for companies as well, right? Because it's not only just handing over some money, but it's also something that really brings value. So I think we see three things. One really important one is obviously you contribute to a better world with all the knowledge and technology and the people that you have in order to contribute to the sustainable development goals. You will increase employee happiness, inspiration, and motivation, which will lead to retention. And I see that happening at Ortec, for example, as well. I think maybe I'm also a good example of that for staying with Ortec for all that time. At last, maybe not the most important one, and we're also not really a big fan of greenwashing kind of endeavors. But well, obviously, you also get some positive and purposeful PR and external communication if you work with us on, for example, our website and on our social media. Well, there are a couple of ways in which you can contribute. So this is a bit of an onion model. We have strategic impact partners who really contribute for a longer term to the mission of analytics for a better world, like Ortec, for example. Then we have a business tech sponsor, which is a bit more flexible and a little less commitment. You can also be a project sponsor where you focus on one specific project. So, for example, if you want to sponsor the academy, that would be more in that direction. And we have ecosystem members and peers who are more joining our meetups and joining our webinars and joining brainstorms, for example. And as Mark also said, I'm also really excited to share that we have some serious conversations and positive conversations going on with people from DHL. I'm not sure where Lutz is. There's Lutz. Hi. So that's really great that you're that interested. And also Gurobi, who joined online. So Gurobi also offered us to support licenses, technology licenses for a better world, which is, I think, an amazing contribution. And I hope a lot of other organizations will follow their great example. Well, what can you give? I think there's a plethora of options. I've listed a few, so you can offer people, and well, offering people sounds a bit silly, but you can your people can collaborate with us in our projects that we do together with NGOs, or your people can teach in our academy, for example. Project managers, people who are good in marketing and communications, for example. Well, there's plenty to do. Data, obviously, data is also a challenge, also in the NGO world. So maps, map data, satellite imagery, mobile data, just to start. But this also something that you can contribute. Technology, so licenses, cloud environments, optimization models, machine learning models, you name it, or financial sponsorship. And in this way, you contribute to the several activities that we do, who I already subscribed, and through that you support our mission and help us apply analytics and contribute to these sustainable development goals. Again, three ways also for companies to get in touch with us. So one is email us for a sponsor explore session. You can join our events. You can become a mentor. So this academy will also constitute of people teaching and also people mentoring people from nonprofits and NGOs, which I think a really fulfilling and really nice thing to do. And at last, well, please spread the word. Follow us on LinkedIn and increase our impact. And it's not that I'm here begging for likes or that I get really excited about likes, but it really helps in raising awareness and creating a positive vibe. So that was my talk. Again, the email address, you will find it in the slides I share afterwards. Maybe we have time for one or two questions. I'm not sure. How far am I? Oh, no. We don't have that much time. But I will be here all day, so please reach out to me. And I want to introduce now Eliane Annemaat. And well, why did I ask Eliane Annemaat for this talk? Because I met her during, well, all exploration sessions around analytics for a better world. And what I really like about her personal story that she's going to tell is that she's basically seen two sides of the table that we're also discussing here. So both worked at non-profits and at AIDS Fonds, for example, but also worked and is now working in a data science company. So I think this can be a really interesting, this will be a very, very interesting story. And I would like to give the floor to you, Eliane.
Thank you. Gonna keep my phone here because I promised I wouldn't take longer than 30 minutes. I'm just gonna get the clock started. All right. Hi, I'm Eliane, and when I started my career at the age of 23, I graduated as a cultural social anthropologist. I soon found out that the labor market was definitely not looking for me. So it took a couple of detours before I finally landed my very first serious grown-up job in international development as a project assistant. This was quite an exciting time. I was very ambitious. I wanted to prove what I was worth. And I was immediately tasked with one of the most important things that are happening in a project in international development. I recognize a couple of faces from international development, but I'm actually curious how many of you have worked in international development, if I can see. Ah, yeah. All right. So this might sound familiar. I was asked to take charge of the monitoring reports. So I went there, and soon I found myself staring at a screen full of Excel sheets, the stuff of nightmares, indicators I didn't understand, cells that were only half filled in. And I had to somehow make sense of that. I had to combine it, I had to write a report of it, and I had to do it in such a way that our donor would be happy. And I became a little bit desperate there because I just spent so much time. I had no idea what I was doing. So I did what any young, ambitious professional does. I went to my boss and I complained. Said, I don't know about this. This seems like a bad thing to do. And my boss looked at me. She said, well, Eliane, if you don't like it, you can come up with something else. Go ahead. So that's how I kickstarted my career as a monitoring and evaluation specialist out of desperation. And I did it for the next 7 years with less desperation and more passion, I have to admit, because it turned out that evaluating development programs was one of the most challenging and one of the most intricate puzzles that I'd ever dealt with. And I loved resolving it. I loved looking at the data to find out whether or not our programs were having the desired effect. And in the course of these years that I worked as a monitoring and evaluation specialist, I encountered more and more data-driven initiatives. And I became quite fascinated by these new technologies that were introduced. And it came to the point where I decided to take a plunge and shift my career and move to a data science company to really do a deep dive in what this data science really has to offer, especially when we talk about creating a better world. So that's how I ended up at Amsterdam Data Collective, where I work now. Amsterdam Data Collective is a data science company that provides end-to-end services in different sectors. But I focus mostly on the nonprofit and the public sector, where I help organizations in their transition to become more data-driven. I do have a problem letting go of things that I love. So I also work for Disrupt Development, which is an organization that stimulates innovation and systems change in the development sector. So this means that I'm in an interesting position where I have one leg in the nonprofit sector and I have another leg in the tech sector. And it comes with some perspectives that Robert asked me to share with you today. So maybe to go back to that first job, at this point I was 25 and I was working at AIDS Fonds. I loved working at AIDS Fonds. It's a wonderful organization looking to eradicate HIV and AIDS from this world. And I had a bunch of colleagues that I really liked there. So two of these colleagues, I like to go drinking with, because that's sometimes what you do after work. So we went to a bar and we ordered our beers and we started our conversation. And for some reason, I seem to be complaining a lot because I started to complain about how our data was so fragmented. Why was it so difficult to get all of the right data sources together? And how come that our different programs were all having their own sort of activities and their own data sets, and we never really seem to combine? And it's such a shame because there might be so many interesting things happening there. Right, said my colleague. So what if we actually could bring that all together in one database? And my third colleague said, well, I'll up you on that. Why could we not combine our internal programmatic data with maybe some external data source, like from the United Nations, who publish trends on HIV infections every year? So with every beer that we drank, the idea started to become more and more impressive. And we should actually, there we go, that's more accurate. So we became very excited about this idea. And the next morning, when my hangover had subsided, and I felt that this was still a pretty good idea, I decided to get my laptop, start PowerPointing away, and create my very first mock-up of a tool that I was dreaming about. And it looked a bit like this. And yes, this is PowerPoint. I'm still very proud of it. And this is what we created. So a database where all of our data would be combined in one, where we could look at our target groups, we could look at the different indicators, we could look at the countries and zoom in on the data that was available there. Now with this mock-up, we went to our management team and we got lucky, because AIDS-Fonds at the time was very excited about stimulating innovation. So the MT took us very seriously. They looked at our mock-up, they asked us some very critical questions, but then they gave us a seed grant to get started. So there we were. Based on a mock-up, we suddenly had a project going. Now we knew we couldn't do this alone because none of us were that experienced yet in the world of analytics. So we brought a couple of parties in, and one of them was a research team from a university that was specializing in applying new technologies in the field of humanitarian development. Then the other one, he actually looks like him, was a tech company, a guy who was very excited about developing data products for the development sector. So we had this little cross-sectoral partnership going, and we got some extra funding for it, and we got started. We were, what did we do? We mapped out all the data sources. We did workshops on data literacy, on data governance. And after a year of trying to figure out how to build this first prototype, we finally delivered it. And then when we demoed it to the different teams, we started getting questions like, but what about this functionality? Can we answer this question? We couldn't yet because we hadn't delivered that functionality yet. Or people said, well, it's nice, but I don't know how it's really going to help me in my daily work. And in the end, the prototype that we had, the tool that we had, did work to the extent where we could use it to visualize some interesting trends. We made a couple of reports out of it. But in the bar, we were dreaming about this holy grail that would resolve so many issues. And what we delivered in the end wasn't exactly the holy grail. So that's how our pilot finished. And of course, we were all very eager to learn so that we do it better next time. And we reflected on what exactly here were the barriers. And we realized it was basically to do with three things. The first was exactly that holy grail. We were all dreaming about this magical tool that will resolve all of our issues. And our ambitions were sky high. But then also our use cases. And we actually wanted everything. We didn't want to make concessions. We wanted to have everything and do everything. And that's why it took a year to even get a prototype going. And secondly, we realized that all of us had slightly different interests in the project. So for our colleagues, we were mostly concerned with questions like, are we meeting our programmatic goals? Whereas the research team was more concerned with the overarching research questions that we're trying to answer. And this project was just a small part of that. And then the developer guy, he was mostly concerned with making a scalable tool, an efficient tool that could ideally also be upscaled to all types of other organizations in the field. Now, while these interests don't necessarily clash, it does mean that everyone had a slightly different interpretation of what that tool should look like. And because we all spoke also kind of a different language, we weren't very aware that we were walking around with different interpretations. And ultimately, we kind of lost track of the user in the end, the user who was supposed to use that tool, or colleagues who had different questions than we ended up with providing to them. So the reason why I'm telling you this story is not just because I want to share my learnings in the hope that you find it insightful. It's also because in the years after, when I started working with more nonprofits and tech companies, I started encountering the same pattern over and over and over again. So many initiatives, promising analytics initiatives, that somehow didn't really fulfill their full potential. And by reflecting on it, I realized it had to do with three main things. All good things come in three. I think we just established that. So I did my best to not only have three things, but also three P's. I like a little bit of alliteration there. Purpose, process, and people. So in terms of purpose, I think Dick mentioned it before, huh? Purpose is important. And when we talk about purpose, if you look at purpose in the tech sector, for a long time, it has really been about creating value, finding a solution to a problem. And so when we talk about purpose in the tech sector, we talk about like pain relievers or gain creators. We really look to fit a solution to a problem. But if we look at the SDGs, it's slightly more complicated than that. And you see more and more tech companies also interested in redefining their purpose, talking about making a social impact. And then this basic question of, well, let me put it this way, does it work? Is really complicated to answer, because if we want to know whether we fulfill the purpose in the case of a tech innovation, we ask ourselves, does it work? We look at the number of users that are using the product or the model. We look at maybe the revenue that was created, or we look at conversion rates. When we talk about more complicated stuff like the SDGs, it's not so much about doing things right, but it's more about doing the right things. So let me give you a short example that I think illustrates this point quite well. I lived in Australia for a while in Melbourne, and my friend told me a funny story that always stuck with me. He said, in the 90s, the state of Victoria wanted to improve public health of their citizens. And I noticed, especially in Melbourne, people love to cycle, but there were also a lot of accidents. So they said, you know what? In order to reduce the risk of like head injuries in cycling accidents, we're going to instate a mandatory regulation that people have to wear helmets on bicycles. And this was a pretty solid solution, because research had shown that if you wear a helmet, your risk of head injury goes down by like 70%. So it made total sense to instate this. Now, a couple of years later, this policy evaluation team goes to evaluate this particular policy, and they can indeed confirm that, yay, the number of head injuries had gone down by roughly 15%. So that was great. But they noticed something else. And that's that the overall number of cyclists had gone down as well. In fact, it had gone down so very drastically that, well, a follow-up research was needed. Like, why? Where did all the cyclists go? And it turned out that a lot of young people in particular had stopped cycling after the regulation on mandatory helmets. Kind of, yeah, they didn't really like it. They didn't think it was fashionable or something else. But the point is, they stopped cycling altogether. And what was more ironic is that a health benefit model then proved that this regulation that was intended to improve public health actually, in the end, had a detrimental effect, because so many young people stopped exercising that their net health actually went down. So my point with this is that even the most logical solution can sometimes have slightly detrimental effects if you look at the bigger picture. And that bigger picture is important to keep in mind when we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. So when we talk about, does it work? In the case of the Sustainable Development Goals, I mean, look at it. We talk about climate change. We talk about reducing hunger and poverty. You can no longer just ask, does it work? Because they're all interconnected. you have to look at that bigger picture. So how do you know if you're doing the right things? Now, the nonprofit sector has struggled with this for a long time, not in the least because their funding is dependent on it. So they have a lot of pressure to show that that which they do connects to the long-term impact that they make. And so in the past 10 years, there's been a methodology that was adopted by the nonprofit sector called theory of change. Now, I know some of you are familiar with this. And what theory of change does, it connects the thing you do, your activities, to the thing you intend to achieve in the long term, the impact. And in between, it maps out in a very logical, in a causal order, how you think that chain of effects then takes place. So I'm going to give you a quick example of what that looks like. Imagine we all work for a program where we want young girls to have access to education. And we have a couple of activities going, but we somehow have to prove that that's which we do leads to that what we want to achieve. So from research, we know that there are 3 key factors that enable or discourage young people from accessing education. We know that parents need to be able to afford it. We know that societal norms need to be supportive of girls' education. And we also know that menstruation among girls can actually stop them from going to school. So somehow menstrual hygiene products need to be available to them. So now you see that there's one step still missing. How does your campaigns or your support programs, how does that lead to these outcomes? And this is where you start filling in the gap. Because you know that by offering a financial support program, parents will be able to access a financial support system and therefore afford school. We also know that if we do campaigns, we're able to educate family and school teachers on the importance for education, which will then lead to more supportive societal norms. And in terms of menstrual products, we can distribute these through a program. And the campaigns can also help educating girls on this. And all of that leads to menstrual hygiene products being accessible. So this, in a very basic example, is what a TOC looks like. And it's important to keep in mind that if you only follow one of these pathways, you will not reach your goal. You need all of them. That's the bigger picture. It's to understand the complexities of a program where multiple factors and multiple things need to be addressed in order for your goal to be reached. Now you might think to yourself, Jana, it's nice, but why are you telling me this? I'll tell you. There are 3 very, very important things to keep in mind when we are talking about applying analytics for social good. And the TOC can help you with this. The first thing is that the TOC shows you a bigger picture. This is important because you want to avoid your own little Australian helmet solution. You want to understand how your solution, your model, or your product fits into that bigger picture of how you intend to create change. And the TOC helps you with this. So it really helps you to focus on where in this picture your model or your product stands. Then second, and this one is important for nonprofits. So it's funny because nonprofits are very familiar with this methodology, but whenever we talk about data or in analytics, the first thing that people say is, I have so much data, I would like to do more with it. And that's a perfectly fine reason to start looking into analytics. But you need to be careful there, because if you start building ideas based on the data you have, instead of the problem you're trying to resolve, you end up with a solution that might look wonderful, but isn't actually going to contribute anything. So your TOC should be a reminder to yourself to focus on the goal that you're trying to achieve and ask those questions based on that goal, and then find the data that you need. You might already have it, but maybe you don't. Then that can influence your data collection strategies. And lastly, a TOC is very useful for tech companies who are telling me that they want to measure their social impact. The way to measure this is by mapping out how your contribution leads to that bigger impact. And you can use a framework like this to understand what you need to focus on when we talk about measuring social change. All right, let's move on to the process. Now, maybe I should actually get that picture back. When we talk about process, what we see in a nonprofit is that we have very linear long-term programs. We can easily take 5 years to implement a TOC like this, sometimes longer, but usually a couple of years. And with a bit of luck, if we talk about data collection, we do a baseline. after 2.5 years, if we're serious about it, we will do a midterm evaluation to see whether we're on the right track. And at the end, after 5 years, we will go out and see whether everything we did had the desired effect. And this is nice, but when we talk about innovation, which in the case of analytics, it usually is about, you cannot take 5 years to find out whether something is working or not. You need to find out sooner. And this is where the tech sector actually brings in a lot of expertise. You see, in the early 2000s, when the software development industry was really growing super fast, they ran into a couple of problems with the common waterfall type of linear programs or linear projects. And it led to so much problems with delayed tools, delayed products, and also failed products that they said we have to do it differently. So they come up with these principles of agile working. I think this might be familiar already to some of you. And these principles really focus on a more iterative, cyclical process of planning, designing, developing it, then testing it. If it works well, you release it. And based on the feedback, you expand it or adapt it. And so instead of building one big holy grail and trying to roll it out, you actually make it smaller. You phase it up a little bit. You cut it up in smaller pieces and you start expanding along the way. And this really significantly reduces your risk of building something that in the end is not going to fulfill its purpose. So important here is to translate your big ideas to a smaller process. A couple of years ago, I was working in a program that was focused on delivering sexual and reproductive health and rights information to young people all over the world. And I was using a lot of analytics to see whether this was working well. And we saw this thing where a lot of the more pleasure-focused content, so the fun stuff and the interesting stuff about how to have like interesting sex or how to have orgasms, that was visited really well by our users. But some of the more risk reduction content, like how to have safe sex or how to avoid STDs or unwanted pregnancies, they were falling behind. And we were like, oh, we got to do something about this. So we came up with an experiment about using gamification to improve the engagement with risk reduction topics. Gamification is when you use game principles in this case in an educational environment. So we were experimenting with quizzes, like fun quizzes for people to engage more with this type of information. And I asked for a research grant and I only got 10K. And I was really disappointed because I wanted more. My ambitions were still there and I only got 10K. And I was like, bummer, how am I going to do this? And I realized, well, there's no way around it. I only have 10K, so I'm gonna have to keep it small. So I'll just cover the basics. We will cover 3 country platforms. We will look at only 2 types of quizzes, and we're just gonna run it for like 6 weeks because then the money is gone. So we were forced to keep it really small. And I brought together a team of different experts, and we decided to meet twice a week, review the plan, make quick adaptations because we knew after 2 months, like the money's gone, we cannot continue. So we made very quick iterations. And after 6 weeks, we had a really good pilot running in 3 countries that resulted in really, really good analytics, really good results, and with some very clear recommendations on how to scale up from there. Now, for me, the secret to the success of this pilot is not because gamification was so fair. I mean, it was, but that's not the secret of the success. The success is really in the fact that we were forced to keep it small. Had I not received such a small grant, I would have definitely made the same mistake and gone all big again. But now we had to, and I believe that that's the reason why this succeeded the way it did. So be careful with your grand ideas, really try to start small. And a way of doing that is by phasing it up. So start with your proof of concept, start with your idea. Is the idea even feasible? And only when you have confirmed this, then you work towards your prototype model. What will this model then look like? And once your prototype is working well enough, you can start thinking about your minimum viable product. And your minimum viable product is when you start rolling it out to the different users. You start gathering that feedback. And only then can you start thinking about expanding, making it bigger, and looking at that holy grail that makes everyone happy. So lastly, people. Yeah, people is always the thing. I think in this case, when it comes to people, I think both the tech sector and the nonprofit sector are doing better and better when it comes to really organizing multidisciplinary teams. And multidisciplinary teams, I really like it. They bring different perspectives. They tend to make ideas better. But there is a slight tendency for fragmentation. When we talk about applying analytics, what you often see are, for example, program people in NGOs. They say, well, I mean, I would like to do something fun, but I don't understand it. So you do, like you develop the models and just come back to us when you're finished and we'll try and implement it. And sometimes that works, but more often it doesn't. It's because the people that develop the models usually don't have the type of domain expertise that the people in the nonprofits have. And in order for something to work really well, you want them to work on this together from the beginning. And then a nonprofit has a concept called co-creation that has become more popular over the years. And co-creation here is very important to keep in mind when we again talk about SDGs. Because the principles of user-centered design, which are so common in the tech world, where you really focus on the perspective of the user, work slightly differently in SDGs. Because what is the user of a tool might not be the target group that in the end benefits from the results of the tool. So when we talk about user-centered design, also keep in mind who in the end is your target group, who is the group of people that is supposed to benefit from this innovation, and make sure to involve those in the designing of your product or your tool or your model. Not just because it will make it better, but also because it significantly reduces the risk of bias. And when we build algorithms, bias is a real risk. All of us carry inherent bias, and I can promise, I can guarantee you, if you ask me to build an algorithm, it will contain my bias in it. So one way of reducing this type of risk is by inviting different people on the table and make sure that they are all involved in building this model, not necessarily in coding it, but at least in setting the boundaries, the thresholds, but also validating the outputs. Then, as a bonus slide, this is something we don't always like to talk about, but let's do it anyway, the money. Because you have to have resources to innovate. And I know this is a tricky thing. I know a lot of nonprofits are excited about exploring analytics in their organizations, but they're not as excited about investing in it. And what happens is that in most of the organizations that still try their way, they do it through pro bono projects. Now, pro bono is a wonderful way to create excitement and enthusiasm about the potential of analytics for a better world. But if you're serious about using analytics in your core strategies as an organization, you're going to have to be serious about getting the resources to do so. Now, resources is a tricky thing for nonprofits because they're mostly dependent on funding, for example, from governments. And this type of funding is super restrictive. We talk about restrictions like that 80% of the total grant should go to in-country activities. They cannot be used in the Netherlands, for example. Or we talk about a 5% overhead limit, which is troubling because research and development is usually part of overhead. So this really restricts the flexibility of nonprofits to use their funding for innovation. But there are ways around it that I would like you to consider. I don't know if there's anyone from a donor perspective in the room or maybe even online, but donors, despite the political pressure that they have to regulate their funding mechanisms, they can incentivize this a little bit. They can incentivize innovation, for example, by setting up funds that are specific for strategic partnership between tech companies, researchers, and nonprofits. They do that already between strategic partnerships between nonprofits. But you could do the same in a cross-sectoral partnership. You could also consider allocating a specific percentage of your grant specifically for innovation, where perhaps even you want to make use of that phased process that I showed you earlier, where you give money based on proof of concept, then a prototype, and then an MVP. And even if you think, whatever, Eliana, that's never going to work, my donor is never going to give me that money, I would like you to consider the alternatives, because we tend to be a little bit focused on our own particular fields of work and their own funding schemes. I know the academic world have their own funding. We know the nonprofit have their own funding, and so does the tech sector. But if you work in cross-sectoral partnership, you can make smart use of the funding mechanisms available. For example, the tech sector has a lot of potential or a lot of options for funding based on AI innovation for social good. So working in a sectoral partnership means that you can actually apply for those grants, and they're usually a lot less restrictive than nonprofit grants. And perhaps, I don't know as much about academic funding, but I would be curious to hear if maybe similar type of funding mechanisms exist in the academic world. So getting started, I hope that, let me just summarize it just in case you've lost track of the story. So when you get started, think about the basic things that we just discussed. Really think about defining your goals and don't look at the data to define your questions. Look at your TUC, look at your goal, your purpose to define those questions, and then find the right data to go with it. And once you do, you can think big, but you have to start small because there are a lot of assumptions there. And those assumptions need to be tested. And the best way to test it is to use that iterative cycle. And lastly, no, not lastly, I have two more points actually. The co-creation with the multidisciplinary team. I've already noticed this is going really well lately, but I'm going to say it anyway. Really make sure you have those multidisciplinary teams going. There is no excuse not to involve the target group anymore in your projects. No excuse. And then lastly, very important, communicate and validate your expectations and your assumptions with your partners. If you don't do this, you end up in the situation that I started off with. You think you have the same idea, but ultimately you have slightly different interpretations. So really make sure that throughout the process you communicate and you validate this. And ultimately, I just think that we should talk perhaps a little bit less and experiment a little bit more. So because I started off my story in a bar, I think it's only appropriate to invite you for drinks later today, because I would love to hear your ideas on how you can kickstart this type of experimenting within your own organization. And the best way I know from my experience is to do that when you're having drinks. Thank you for your attention.
Maybe there are some questions here in the room, or I don't know whether we also have access to the people in the cloud for questions. If there are questions, please go ahead for the speakers or for other people here. Go ahead. But, if there are no questions, there will be drinks. That's also a good alternative.
Well, I have maybe one question. I quite strongly believe in the private sector for humanitarian development or development on the SDG. This initiative is very focused on NGOs. Do you also see the private sector not only sort of contributing people or money, but also carrying it forward or maybe initiating concepts?
You mean that the private sector helps the NGOs also?
Yeah, well, in my experience, NGOs are not always best positioned to do something.
No, but we have here a model, a partnership model. And for instance, Ortec, one of the partners, is from the private sector. And there were mentioned other parties that were technology partners. In this way, the private sector helps via this platform of Analytics for a Better World, the NGOs. So it is a platform that is inclusive to the private sector. That's also what we want. We want a collaboration between the academia, the private sector, to help together the NGOs. Does that clarify a little bit? Yeah. Or, yeah. Yeah.
I've heard a lot about cooperation with the private sector and with the NGOs, and this is wonderful. But I am a public sector student, and I am very curious how we can solve challenges in public sector ministries and challenges, because there's so much data, there's so much happening with the development of smart cities. There's so much more data being put together. What are you guys doing with government to improve their decision-making processes and their data analytics?
Maybe, maybe I could, I would say come and study here, but
Here my heart already lies at night.
but maybe, Dick, you could tell a little bit about the courses that you are teaching.
Municipality example.
Maybe. Don't know.
Yeah, so we also incorporate, let's say, students into our, I don't know, into, let's say, projects, and especially the master thesis projects, of course. So often they are also participating in the projects, but they also doing certain projects, for the master thesis. That's one of the possibilities. And we also have an cooperation with the Amsterdam municipality.
Yeah.
Maybe you can talk about it.
Yeah, yeah, as an example, we have since longer time already, I think now since 5-6 years, we help the municipality of Amsterdam. They have themselves a big data hub. And in this data hub, there are also PhD students that work on long-lasting projects. So they have the smaller projects like operational projects, but they have also longer projects. And in these longer projects, there are PhD students that are
And master
students that are working on interesting problems for the municipality of Amsterdam. For instance, around trustworthy AI. As a government, in which way could you be transparent about the algorithms that are used? How do you avoid that they discriminate people or groups? Those kind of questions. It's called a civic lab, where those questions are discussed. So, yeah.
It gives me enough food to think and read.
Yeah.
Can I perhaps add on to it? Because I like your question, and you see that on a governmental level, you see that that's where a lot of the funding is coming from, and also a lot of the policy making. But if you look at municipal level, you see that at least all of the big cities have their own hubs going. And what is interesting about it is that these hubs are usually not just about municipality organizations, but really also look at different stakeholders. So there's private sector involved, there are a lot of civil society organizations involved, and these almost form like type of network platforms where different initiatives can come together. And what is good about it is that the municipality is ultimately a big player when it comes to implementation of smart city type of initiatives. And by entering these type of hubs, you get to not only find the right type of strategic partners to develop your initiatives, but you can also immediately connect to municipalities in terms of piloting and rolling out your initiatives. So these type of, especially in the smart city world, there's a lot of initiatives in almost every major city in the Netherlands. It's worth checking out.
One last question. Impact is made on the local level, on the personal level. It is where people live and where people experience things. But is there the ambition to do it on the level of ministries, of the highest level above what we humans might experience in our daily lives?
Yeah, I mean,
I think, for example, the work that we do with the World Bank, that is through the World Bank, and we collaborate with governments in Vietnam, for example, or in Timor-Leste. So I think in those type of situations, the impact is also reached there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, or then we probably go for one last question.
I just had one observation, because listening to Eliane, full transparency, we work together. So I know that 10,000 projects you mentioned, and so often, I think NGOs have been, they're arriving late at the party. And often the person driving any form of digital strategy or new thinking in an organization, an NGO, is an intern or somebody quite junior in the organization. So I guess my question to you is, if you're really looking at sustainably introducing the capacity that NGOs are going to need, how are you going to be engaging leadership? Because I think that's where the decision-making is going to be taken on how do we really spend our resources for the future.
Yeah. Now that's a little bit the idea of the academy that we have. I mean, we believe in teaching and training, and We have at different levels. We have courses in the academy. We have at the managerial level, more explaining the opportunities of data and digital and optimization. We have at the, let's say, work floor level, really building sophisticated models yourself. And yeah, in this way, we hope to convince organizations that it is really useful, the tool of analytics and digitalization.
And sometimes it starts very small. Eh? So, for example, the World Food Programme project that Mark was mentioning, it also started very small with students also. But finally, you know, now they have a team of data scientists, 10 or 12 people, and they're applying it in every new operation. Leading to millions more people can be fed because of this. So it takes time, but start small, in fact.
Yeah. And we hope also that our own students choose more the NGOs as places to work. And so then it goes via the work floor. So yeah, we are very optimistic about it. Okay, probably
online questions. So
online questions. How would it work, the online question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, very good.
Oh, hi, I have a question about how successful you've been in maybe finding projects with NGOs.
Yeah, maybe Dick, you could say a few words, or Robert, about it.
Yeah, so it can always be more. So if you have ideas, please come through. But well, since the start, we started collaborating with the Ocean Cleanup, for example. I'm not sure where to look. Where
she has her camera off.
Ah, okay, that's it. Okay, and we are extending on the current partnerships that we already have. For example, with Amref Health, who is here, and with the 510 team, who's here. So I must say, already quite successful, even before the launch. But well, there's a lot to do, so we're also looking for more.
Thank you. Yeah, I asked because we also struggle with finding, you know, ethical or, you know, basically analytics projects within our own organization to support us. Sustainable development goals or maybe decarbonization, right? So that's why I asked the question. It seems like people who have the expertise are more focused, like you said, in the domain, right? That people who have the domain knowledge don't quite have the kind of like the skills and maybe the vision to really kind of see the project opportunity. So it's kind of like we come to them and ask, do you have any project? And they respond with, we don't know any better. Maybe not really. And all the ideas they come to us with are usually not, you know, feasible or just, you know, not the right ideas. So that's at least some of the challenges we face.
Yeah, but also here in the longer term, you hope that yeah, these organizations hire many students with this knowledge, that we that you get more people, like the previous question, more people in the organization that know about the opportunities. And yeah, it's a longer term. I mean, digitalization and digital change is a longer term project. So we are now very happy with the portfolio that we have. But we want to expand it, and yeah, one of the tools doing so is these courses, information platform courses, students that go write their thesis projects with NGOs, those things, and then it will grow. I'm sure about that.
Could I add on to that?
Yeah,
just
of course.
Because I recognize what you're saying. And I find that a lot of when you ask an organization the question, do you have any cool analytics projects that we can help with? Then a lot of organizations grab me like, yeah, maybe. Because it's not always easy to really, if you're not experienced in that type of field before, you don't always know what the possibilities are. So in my own work, half of my time, I swear, like at least 50% of my time goes into defining what exactly it is that organizations want. So that you want to stay away from the you ask, we deliver type of slogan that a lot of tech companies like to have. You ask, we deliver. Don't be that company, because a lot of organizations don't know what they're asking. So you want to spend some time in an equal partnership type of relationship, where you sit together at the table, you analyze the problem, and you start looking for the right type of solution. And that's when a lot of opportunities tend to come up on the table. So start with that sort of exploration, I think you also call it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have one more question. So my name is Marika. I work as a researcher for Oxfam Novib, and I'm actually really excited about the academy that you just talked about. And I'm curious when the program will be available, because I was checking the website. It's launched soon, I saw.
Yeah. Well, what are we going to say? In a month?
Great.
Yeah, so we're working on it. But if you send us an email, then I would also really like your input, for example, on it, so we can discuss the draft version with you. And anybody else who's interested in that, please drop us a line. That would be really great.
Great, thanks.
It's not completely new, this program, in the sense that we are also teaching it already to our regular bachelor and master students. And large parts of those case studies will also be part of this program. So it's not a real greenfield operation, these teaching programs. We have a lot of experience with them. You had also a question.
Was just more of a continuation on the last question, because I am from an NGO, and we do often get the question of what can we do for you. Most of the time I don't know what I'm doing, but when I do have ideas and when I do want to brainstorm, we most often connect or not connect on the limitation of the research, especially on the tech side of it. And I think it's very insightful if you could maybe publish a list or examples or whatever of the things that you do and what can be done and the limitations of what we can expect from that. Because that makes it a lot easier for me to define a question, to define a field as well, and to really put it into practice more as to what do you want, because that's such a broad thing. And I work with so many SDG topics that it sometimes is a little bit too much, and it's easier if you can just come up with like an example.
Yeah. Do you have yourself an example of something that can be done with a restriction? How you formulate that?
We are now collaborating together with a big research company that is looking to build image-driven technology I work with fashion. Fashion is one of the most dirty, rotten industries that there is, and I work in secondhand fashion. And they're developing a type of research for us that can put value on a secondhand item, so that you take the human approach out of it, because everyone has a different value and different valuation to it. And they are now building for us something like that. But because it's because it's limited to how big that you're looking towards brands, towards value. It's such a broad thing that you can research. So you have to limit that, and you have to, from the technical side, it's too broad. So sometimes it's easier if you can say, well, if that's your idea, or if that's what you're interested in, this is what we can deliver, or this is how we can maybe approach it, or this, like she said, this is too big and we can make it smaller for you. Because I don't know what is possible and what is not possible, but by coming together, we managed to pick up one little thing in that whole process, which was quite interesting.
Yeah, I think the best way, because the question is rather generic, the best way is still to contact us. Because if we do a project, we always define the scope of the project and explain you what you can expect and what you cannot expect, or what we cannot deliver. So I think to publish a list would probably be not such a good idea, but to have
Well,
to
maybe
have
not a
to
list,
have
but maybe more like open doors.
Yeah.
For you, open doors are quite easy.
So
to
we have a
find.
place on the website also for that. So we have one place reserved for stories of impact, which is I think very close to what you are looking for. And indeed, as Mark said, I think this is also part of these ideation sessions that I mentioned and these exploration sessions. So if you're interested in that, and there we can also jump into the limitations part.
Sure. Very nice. Thank you very much. I think the drinks will be served one floor.
First floor.
It's the first floor. First floor. We start again at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, 4, I think.
So break.
Maybe one second for the
breakout.
Yeah, so we one floor up here. There's the breakout session. So you have 2 rooms for the breakout session. One is with Joris Wagenaar. Not sure. Oh, he's not waving. With Joris from Tilburg. Mark from the. There he is. Yeah. He was also a bit sick, but he will do it virtually. And Mark from the Homberg, who will also present here. And upstairs we will have the story from Kai Kaiser, who is also there on the screen from the World Bank, together with our own Parvati. They're going to be upstairs, and Tinka Valentine, who's right there. We'll talk about data responsibility in the humanitarian sector. So it is a really, really difficult choice, obviously, but you have to choose. Some people stay here and some people go up. And the guys from the Hybrid Learning Theater will explain to the people in the cloud how that will work. So there will be also 2 breakout rooms, and you can also join.
Excuse me.
Andrew is watching with 2 phones, so she has
another question.
Are you?
Use chat.
She's logged in with 2 phones, so she has to turn off one phone.
Can you turn off one of your devices, your phone or your laptop?
Okay, just a moment. Okay. Yes.
It's okay.
My internet connection is very unstable, so I have to watch the slides through my laptop and listen through my mobile, and that makes the echo. Sorry. There is an interesting question in the chat. Can you answer that question? Asked by Dr. Alessandro Zocca, because that's interesting for many of us, probably.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
It's in the chat.
Oh, then we have to go to the chat. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, one
from
Dr.
Yeah, Alex.
I think from Alexandro.
Alessandro Zocca.
Alexandro Zocca?
Yeah, I will read it. What role can fellow academics in the applied data science optimization domain not affiliated with UvA play within AAA Analytics for a Better World? And how can we become involved?
Yeah, maybe I can say something about that. Yeah. So in fact, we also looking for, let us say, companies to join us, but also for academics to join us. So for example, also the project Ocean Cleanup we do together with colleagues from the London Business School. So also there are opportunities. But you know, I can't give you an opportunity already for tomorrow. But if you're interested for that, please contact me. And then I put you on the list. And when applicable, then I can make an assignment for you.
Yeah. That answer the question. Yeah, probably also we have this meetups, regular meetups.
Yeah.
During these meetups, we could
but
also...
I think the question was more about how can a researcher
That's true, yeah. But during the meetups, also opportunities may arise.
That's true,
and can be discussed.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Then time for drinks.
Drinks, a little shorter, but
yeah.
Right, so sorry for being late while I was chairing the session. Bit up in all. But I'm really pleased to announce Joris Wagenaar from the Zero Hunger Lab in Tilburg, who will share about optimal humanitarian depot locations. So really closely tied also to the projects that Dick has done there. And well, I can say that the Zero Hunger Lab is, I think, a really close friend of ours at Analytics for a Better World, and we are continuously looking for more ways to explore and work together. And well, I'm really happy that that you are here. Unfortunately, through camera, Joris, but well, it happens. I'll enjoy his talk.
Thank you. So welcome everyone. So indeed, my name is Joris Wagenaar, and I'm doing this presentation now from home, and that's very unfortunate, but I am sick, and in the view of the pandemic of the last couple of years, I did not find it a very good idea to be there while infecting everyone. So I hope that everyone can follow it in this way as well. So I joined the Zero Hunger Lab a little bit more than a year ago, and now I want to tell you something about one of the projects that we have been doing. And this was a joint work together with Valentijn, Stine, Dick den Hertog, and Hein Fleuren. And I know that Valentijn and Dick are actually present there. So if you have, after this, if you still have some questions to ask or want to ask something during the drinks, you can always ask one of those two about a little bit more about this project. Let me see. So now first an outline of this presentation. So I will start with telling you a little bit more about what the Zero Hunger Lab actually is before delving into the actual problem that I wanted to discuss within this presentation. And there I give you an introduction. I'll show you which approach that we use to solve the problem. I'll show you some results. If I have time, which I doubt that there is still much time left, I will show you also a robust optimization approach that we've used, and I will conclude with some discussions and conclusions. But first, the Zero Hunger Lab. So the Zero Hunger Lab has been raised a couple of years ago, and since a little bit more than a year, I am now also working at the Zero Hunger Lab. And the Zero Hunger Lab was actually formed at the Tilburg University because hunger is still one of the world's most challenging problems. And according to the United Nations, as many as a little bit more than 800 million people go to bed hungry every night. And even worse, every 10 seconds, a child dies somewhere in the world due to facing hunger and or malnutrition. And at Tilburg University, the founders of the Zero Hunger Lab thought, well, we want to use data science to aid in this problem. So we want to use data science to help to ensure global food and nutrition security. And this is actually our slogan at the Tilburg University, at the Zero Hunger Lab. We call this Bytes for Bytes. So we want to use the data science in order to reduce the amount of hunger in the world. So to that end, we make use of data and very complex and sometimes less complex algorithms in order to advise NGOs and other organizations with solutions and or advice to the problems that they face, and in the hope that they are able to make better decisions in order, well, mainly regarding two projects, that is the emergency relief problems, that in case there is a disaster somewhere around the world, that we want to send food and supplies, emergency relief items in the most efficient way towards them, such that as many people as possible are helped. Or also we focus on sustainable development, where it's more in the long-term process, that there is enough food and that everyone has accessibility to the correct amount of food in order to don't go to bed hungry and have the right nutritional values. So to that end, we have several projects, except for the one that I'm now going to talk about. We have multiple other projects, and a couple of examples are that we have a project that is focusing on developing healthy, sustainable, and affordable diets. As a consumer, well, you usually know whether you're what you eat, whether that is affordable, yes or no. But to a little bit less extent, you know how healthy it is what you are actually eating, and to an even more less extent, you know how sustainable the food is that you're eating. So we have a project where we are working on creating healthy, sustainable, and affordable diets. Another project on which we are focusing is with together with the Dutch food banks. And well, first of all, we want to forecast how many people in the near future and in the longer future might need the assistance from the food bank. So how many people in the Netherlands might need assistance from the food banks because they don't have enough money for the food themselves. And then we look at, okay, given the demand of the amount of people that are in need of food in the coming future, what are the best investments that we can make regarding the transportation and the storage of the food within the food banks? There are 171 food banks at the moment in the Netherlands, and what should we store at what location such that we can meet the demand in the near future? And a final project is the Child Growth Monitor, and that is we are trying to develop a mobile app that is able to detect malnutrition for children as early as possible. So we develop a mobile app that where you can set up a picture of a child, and then the mobile app detects whether that child actually is malnutritioned, the yes or the no, such that we know whether we need to help those persons, yes or no. So those are 3 examples of the projects that we are currently working on, and those are all 3 are more or less not regarding the immediately response phase, so during the emergency relief phase, but are more for the sustainable part. And now I want to tell you something more about the a project that we did regarding the emergency relief phase, and that is on the optimal humanitarian depot locations. So during a disaster, mathematics can be of aid during such a disaster. It can be in multiple ways. It can be of an aid. It can be to minimize the expected travel time in case you want to route from A to B in order to help people. You can use mathematics to find the most efficient route from A to B. Especially in case the infrastructure has been broken due to the disaster, for instance, during an earthquake or during a flood, how to route from A to B is something that mathematics can help. But it can also help if the infrastructure is broken, then it can advise you which part of the infrastructure should be rebuilt first in such a way that you can have a closed infrastructure again as fast as possible, that you are able to transport relief items towards the beneficiaries that are in need of the release of these relief items. Another possibility to use mathematics is to decide which relief items and how many relief items to store to pre-position in case a disaster takes place somewhere in the world. So where should, not where, but how many items should we relocate and what items should we relocate? And then the 4th question is, where in the world should we locate these relief items? So we should determine the optimal, and the optimal is a vague concept because it is for future future disasters, but regarding the past disasters that took place in the past, what would have been the optimal depot locations to store relief items? And that is actually what I focus on in this talk. So to determine the optimal depot locations with respect to previous disasters that took place in the past, where should we locate these depot locations to store relief items, to pre-position relief items? Okay, in order to answer this question, we must first understand what happens during such a disaster. So we have 2 important phases. That is the immediate response phase and the recovery phase. So the immediate response phase is the phase that takes place immediately when a disaster takes place. So when a disaster strikes a certain area, there are many people in need of food, medicine, shelter, and many other things. And we want to send those items as fast as possible towards those beneficiaries. So in the first phase, the immediate response phase, we use most of the time, we make use of planes in order to send those items as fast as possible near the locations, and then from the end-to-end, the transportation is then done via trucks. But most of the time, those beneficiaries are in need of relief items for a longer duration of time, not only for a couple of days, but for weeks or maybe months. So we need to set up some sort of supply chain, a continuous loop of sending items to the beneficiaries that are in need of the items. So in the second phase, that is the recovery phase, we set up such a loop, and that is done most of the time, via transportation, via boat, and then via trucks for the end-to-end transportation. So as an example, if you are an NGO that wants to aid or wants to assist beneficiaries during a disaster, and you are an NGO, for instance, located in the Netherlands, and there take place disasters all around the globe. So in this example, we have disasters in the center of America, in Africa, in Asia, and in Australia. So every time there is a disaster, the NGO first has to send in the immediate response phase the relief items via plane, and then a continuously supply chain via the boat. And he has to do that to all the disasters it wants to aid. So as you can see, it's a long transportation, and this will take a lot of efficiency and a lot of time in order to transport all the items to the beneficiaries that are in need. If the NGO would have had the possibility to store relief items before a disaster actually takes place at certain locations around the world, for instance, in this example, we have two humanitarian logistics service providers, so two depot locations, one in the south of America and one in Africa. And then the disasters that happen, then we can send the relief items not from the base location of the NGO, but from the depot locations. So the disaster in Center of America is now supplied via the hub in South America, and the other three disasters are all supplied with relief items from the hub that is located in Africa. And as you can see, the transportation time and the transportation costs are most likely much lower in this situation, so in this example. But on the other hand, it is not cheap to set up such a hub. So in the best situation, we would have hubs all over the world, and no matter where a disaster takes place, we can immediately supply it from a hub that is right around the corner. There's a limited budget, so there is only a place to locate a limited amount of hubs around the world. So the question is, where should we actually establish these hubs? So at what locations around the world? It could be anywhere. Where should we establish the hubs? So because there are two phases, so we have the immediate response phase and the recovery phase, where in the immediate response phase, we have to make use of airplanes, and in the recovery phase, we make use of boats. We know that every hub should be located near to both a large airport and a large harbor. So that gives us some restrictions to where we can actually locate our depots. But still, if we take this restriction into account, there are still many potential hub locations, much more than we could place hubs. So we still need to decide among these potential hub locations where to actually locate the hubs. Okay, so that is what we wanted to investigate. So where should UNHRD actually locate its hubs? And then we thought about what would be the objective. So we have actually two objectives in this case. The first objective is we want to minimize the transportation costs. So by selecting the hubs, the locations of the hubs around the world, we want to minimize the transportation costs of sending relief items from a hub towards a potential disaster. because the more money we save in that perspective, the more money that can be used in order to actually help the people. But secondly, we also want to minimize the maximum response time. And with that, we mean that if we only focus on minimizing transportation costs, then we place hubs only at locations where disasters are likely to take place. So if there are locations around the world where multiple disasters took place in the neighborhood, then it's likely to place a hub there, which actually makes sense. But as a consequence of that, if there are outliers with respect to disasters, so if there's a disaster that takes place at the other side of the world, it still takes a lot of time to respond to that disaster. And we want to actually limit the maximum response time. We want to make sure that we are able to respond to a place all around the world if a disaster takes place there within a certain limit of time. So we want to minimize the transportation costs, but we also want to minimize the maximum response time. Okay. UNHCR currently already has 6 hub locations. So they have located one in Panama, one in Las Palmas, one in Accra, one in Brindisi, one in Dubai, and one in Kuala Lumpur. And they asked us to see whether these locations are actually on the correct location given the disasters that took place in their data set, so in the previous years, or should they have been established at a different location. And the other question they asked, okay, we now have these 6 hub locations, but if we want to extend our network and if we want to add an additional hub, where should we place that with respect to potential disasters in the future? So we try to answer those 2 questions. So as a small summary, we have the 2 objectives that we want to minimize. We want to minimize the maximum response time. We want to minimize the transportation cost. And we have 2 questions that we want to answer for UNHCR. First of all, it's the so-called greenfield situation. So if we are allowed to allocate 6 hubs anywhere around the world, would it be pretty much similar to the current UNHCR hub locations? And secondly, the expansion situation, given the current UNHCR locations, where should we add 1 hub to the network in order to minimize either the transportation costs or in order to minimize the maximum response time? Okay, so to answer those questions, we have developed an approach, and we used input regarding disasters and input regarding hubs. And the input regarding the disasters are actual disasters on which UNHCR responded in the previous 2 years. So, and the previous 2 years was at the time that we did this investigation. It is from 2017 until 2019. We have data to which UNHCR actually responded. And a disaster is then represented by the demand, and the demand is the number of affected people. So the number of people that are in need of food, medicines, and other things. And we have some input regarding the hubs. So we have the potential list of hub locations, and we have some assumptions regarding the hubs. Namely, the most important assumption that we have is we assume that hubs have infinite capacity. And as a consequence of that, it means that if there is a disaster somewhere around the world, we can supply it from a single hub only. And we will always supply it from the hub that is nearest towards that disaster. After having some discussions with UNHCR, this is actually what they want, ideally in practice, but in reality, this assumption is not there yet. So for future research, it might be the case that we need to adapt this assumption. And our objective is then to open, either 6 potential hub locations and to minimize the cost and the maximum response time, or to add 1 additional hub towards the current set of hub locations to minimize cost and maximum transportation time. Okay, so to that end, we have developed a mathematical model, which I will not delve into detail, but I do want to make some important notes about this mathematical model. And namely, like I have mentioned a couple of times, we want to minimize transportation costs and maximum response time simultaneously. But also after having discussions with UNHCD, it's very hard to really determine how to combine those two. So what the trade-off is having a 1 hour more maximum response time, is that worth 1 million? Is it worth 2 million? Is it worth 3 million? Or is it worth less? We didn't know. So it was not possible to answer that question. So we created a so-called Pareto front. And to that end, we decided to first of all, minimize the maximum response time. So that is, for instance, 23 hours. And then for a maximum response time of 23 hours, we minimized our costs, which would be a certain cost. And then we set the maximum response time to 24 hours. We minimize the cost again. We set the maximum response time to 25 hours, minimize the cost again, and so on. And in this way, we obtain multiple different solutions, and we can show that to UNHCD in order to choose which of those solutions they find best. And the second thing I want to include is that the more disasters we include, the slower the computation time becomes. So we have included 2 years of disasters. We could include more years, but including 100 years of disasters, historical disasters, would make our model explode with the computation time. So we needed to be smart about how to solve this model, but I won't delve into details in that during this presentation. Okay, then some results. So like I said, we have included the disasters between January 2017 and April 2019. And we wanted to compare our solutions with the current solutions. And we wanted to see if we add one additional hub, where would that be given the current network of UNHCR. So like I said, what we did is we first minimized the total maximum response time. And we found that with placing 6 hubs anywhere across the globe, the minimum maximum response time was actually 23 hours. So with a maximum response time of 23 hours, we have total transportation cost of approximately 45 million. And actually, if we use 24 hours of maximum response time and 25 hours of maximum response time, still the best cost that we could obtain was approximately 45 million. So that means that we can always have a better solution to use a maximum response time of 23 hours against that cost than against the same cost, a maximum response time of 24 hours. So the only important solution there is to have the maximum response time of 23 hours. But for a maximum response time of 26 hours, we actually found lower costs. And for a maximum response time of 27 hours, we found even lower cost. And we found the lowest amount of possible transportation costs for a maximum response time of 28 hours. And that is a transportation cost of approximately 42 million. And increasing the maximum response time after that would not decrease the total transportation cost. So this actually means that we have 4 important solutions, namely a maximum response time of 23 hours, of 26 hours, of 27 hours, and of 28 hours. And we didn't know which of those solutions was best. And I will show you the solutions that we have actually found. So this is the solution for a maximum response time of 23 hours, where the green dots, the large green dots, are the locations of the hubs, and the smaller dots are actually are actually the locations of the disasters that took place in the previous 2 years. And as you can see, we have our 6 hubs are located pretty much across the entire globe, but still the locations are relatively similar to the locations of UNHCR. We have a location in the center of America, we have a location in the western part of Africa, we have a location in the Middle East, we have a location in Asia. The only 2 differences are one in the eastern part of Africa and one in Australia. And especially the one in Australia stands out because there are a little amount of disasters that took place in this area, but still we have a hub here, and that is because in order to be able to have a response time of 23 hours towards these outliers, we needed to have a hub in this location. If we increase the maximum response time, so if we increase it to 26 hours, you see that the hub that was located in Australia is now in Brindisi instead of in Australia, in Rhodesia, there are more disasters that took place near to them, but it will increase our maximum response time towards these outliers. And the longer our maximum response time is, so if we increase it to 27 hours and 28 hours, the more to the western part of the world these disasters, the hubs actually locate. So it depends on what is actually wanted, which of those solutions is best. But what we always see is that there is always one hub, no matter which of these 4 solutions, there is always one hub in the eastern part of Africa. So that is one that is currently not in the that currently is not there for UNHRD, but that always shows up in our solutions. And that also shows up in our solutions regarding the expansion situation. So where we have the current set of hub locations and we want to add one other hub, we also see a similar solution. So either we focus on minimizing the maximum response time, then we find that the maximum response time is 25 hours, and then we have to locate a hub in either Australia, Papua New Guinea, or New Zealand. Whereas if we focus on minimizing the transportation costs, so if we have a 26-hour response time, then we minimize the transportation costs and we place actually a hub in Mombasa in Kenya. And we see that the transportation costs are way lower in that situation than in any of the other situations. So I see that it is already almost time. So I only want to mention a couple of words on robust optimization. So far the talk was about where to locate the hubs with respect to the past situation, but of course you want to locate hubs with respect to future disasters, not to past disasters. So we have also included a robust optimization approach where we have an approach that takes into account not the expected scenario, but the worst case scenario, that what in the worst case could happen in the future. And we have tested this approach and we have actually seen that if we take robust optimization into account, that it has only an effect in case we do not have many data about the disasters that took place in the past. In case in the future, the disasters will most likely be more or less similar to the current disasters, then you should just use the approach that I first talked about. And in case we expect the situation to be way different than it is now, for instance, we have not included anything regarding COVID within this solution, so maybe things change after COVID. And so if the disasters and the amount of people that are in need of help will change with respect to the future a lot, then it would be a good idea to apply robust optimization in order to locate these hubs. Okay, so the conclusion is that we have a nominal and robust model for selecting the potential hub locations. And well, our conclusions for the nominal approach is that actually UNHRD already has locations that are nicely spread around the world, and that 4 of their hubs overlap with our solutions, with any of the solutions that we found. And the only one that came up within our solutions and that we also have a discussion about with them is one hub in the eastern part of Africa. And well, in our solutions, it turned out to be Mombasa, but it could, having a hub in the eastern part of Africa would be sufficient. And our conclusion for the robust optimization approach, like I said, we should only use robust optimization for this type of research in case we expect different type of disasters. So more beneficiaries, so more people that are affected by disasters than there were in the previous couple of years. Okay, thank you very much for listening, and thank you for having me here to have a presentation. And I'm not sure whether there's time for questions or not.
Maybe one question.
Sure.
I can already hear. Anybody have a question?
Yes, I've got one. So I believe you won the Edelman Award with this project, right? So
no, not with this project. That is a project that where I was not involved.
Okay. But that was not my question. I understand that you did the Pareto trade-off, between service levels and cost, really. So response time. Yes. So is there, with the customer or with the NGO that you work with, is there a scientific approach to determining the optimum there? What is the optimum in service levels? Because it sounds a little bit like a risk utility curve. So how scientific do they get about this?
Yes, that is very hard. So to really state the optimum, you should really know the trade-off between the two of them. So is it worth to save 1 hour of maximum response time versus how much money is that worth? And after discussions, we tried to find a certain value, but it was not possible to really place a value on it. And I think it is also good to show a multiple layer of a solution and not having a sort of black box that pushes out one solution and says, well, this is the best solution. We also went for having still a black box to them, but that pushes out multiple solutions from which they can choose with their experience. So like I said, we took into account several assumptions, for instance, the infinite capacity of hubs, which are not realistic. And also, if you try to model the exact practice that takes place in reality, it's almost impossible to take everything into account. So it's almost impossible to create one single model that is always able to push out the optimal or the best solution. So in my opinion, it usually works better to have a model that creates several solutions, which are all relatively good, and present them towards, your client or the one with whom you're working together, and that they can choose from those set of solutions, that they can choose which one works best, which one feels best for them.
Can I have also a question?
Yeah, sorry, we have to. Otherwise, we're getting a little late. But maybe in the chat, you can ask the question to yours, and yours you can reply.
Sure, of course.
Thanks a lot for sharing this story, and I would like to continue to. Continue story with Mark. So Mark is the scientific lead of the 510 team, which is an initiative of the Dutch Red Cross. I think their impact is amazing, and they specifically focus on applying digital and data science tools for humanitarian aid and humanitarian response. Mark will tell a lot more about that. I saw his first deck was like a very big set of really cool use cases. I think it's trimmed down now a bit, but I'm really looking forward to this. Please come up and here's the.
Thank you, Robert. Then I guess I should change my title to Science to Impact, as you recommended to Dick. I'm very happy to present here on behalf of 510. Let's see if this works. Yeah, there you go. I would like to first set the scene a little bit for, let's say, the context we are working in as the Red Cross. Well, I think all of you know that we will have more climate-related disasters because of climate change. And this will also lead to increased impact. And specifically, we are looking at, or at least in my presentation now, at hydrometeorological type of disasters that you can see here in this blue box. So for example, drought, floods, landslides, storms, and wildfires. And at the bottom right, you can see that this is leading to more and more impact. And actually, this climate change is a double threat to vulnerable communities in developing countries. They are facing more extreme events and also more frequently. And due to the macroeconomic impacts of climate change, also their resilience is reduced. And on top of that, actually, the developing countries have contributed the least to climate change, but that's maybe on the side. But this all means that they are less able to manage shocks. At the same time, as you can see at the bottom right, funding available for humanitarian response, for example, does not meet the requirements. So for example, in 2017, there was a shortage of around 40%, as compared to what humanitarian agencies needed. At the same time, in parallel, there's a digital and a data revolution going on. And for example, the World Bank showed, but it's already a few years ago, that now 75% of the world's population has access to a mobile phone. And yeah, here you can see a picture that actually Robert and I took when we were in Bangladesh many years ago. So there is a rapid increase in small and big data due to this increased digitization. But actually there is also then an increase in the digital divide. As you can see in this map here, Africa is still quite, let's say, yellow. And that means that a lot of people in Africa still do not have access to internet. There's data literacy, there's a data capacity gap. So maybe with initiatives like this, like 510 or Analytics for Better World, we have to watch out that there is not more data capacity becoming in the hands of the organizations in the global north, whereas the organizations in the global south are lacking this capacity. Some people use also the term data colonialism for this. So that's something we try to keep in mind. But these kind of two trends, completely different, of course, but let's say more disasters, but also more data, were at the origin of the creation of 510. And 510 is an initiative of the Netherlands Red Cross, and we aim to improve the speed, the quality, and the cost effectiveness of humanitarian aid by creating products using data and digital. 510 million square kilometers is the total surface of the Earth, for those of you who are wondering about where our name is coming from. And it's a bit an ambitious name, but yeah, we aim to help every Red Cross national society in need anywhere. And actually, until today, we have been able to collaborate already with around 50 Red Cross national societies. So we were founded in March 2016, with a group of 3 people. So yeah, I was one of them. And yeah, we never stopped growing, I have to say. We're now a team of around 100 people. And yeah, I guess what's maybe special about this is that we work a lot with volunteers. That's also in the veins of the Red Cross, but you maybe are more aware of our, let's say, first aid type of volunteers, but we are working with, let's say, highly skilled data science volunteers. So yeah, we're very lucky to have all those people helping us. And what we're doing is that we work on different themes and topics that you can see on this slide. And I will focus now on anticipatory action and emergency support. But I'm happy to also discuss later on over drinks these other topics. And then, yeah, actually Joris also mentioned already, let's say the response phase, the recovery phase. Yeah, they're all part of what you can see on the left, the different disaster management phases. So I'm not sure if many of you use these phases in your work, but yeah, this is often used in the humanitarian world or the people that are working on disaster risk reduction. So you have the preparedness phase, the response phase, the recovery phase. And actually there's one kind of new phase that I've added here that we call anticipatory action. And I will explain later on what I mean with this. But this disaster management, yeah, we can actually do more here with data analytics. And that's what I try to show here. We have more and more big data becoming available. So remote sensing data, drone data, mobile operator data. So call detail records, for example. Everyone leaves a trace in the mobile network. And then also small data. So for example, household surveys, focus group discussions, damage and needs assessments. This is not, let's say, really new data, but it's sometimes called small data because this data becomes more and more available also online via, for example, repositories. So that's, let's say, the new thing about this. Yeah, and then on the right, you see different data analytics techniques that I can now think of or that we are using, but I hope through our collaboration that we will discover more methodologies. But for example, text mining, deep learning, machine learning are some of the examples that I will show. But let me first now focus a little bit on what we are doing in the response phase, so the emergency support. We have on the one hand remote support, so people from the Red Cross office in The Hague that are helping remotely, but we have also people deployed. And actually now, as we are speaking, we have about 4 people that are deployed in relation to the Ukraine crisis. This was going a bit too fast. Well, here you can see how we are working on remote support for the Cyclone Irma in Sint Maarten with a group of people, and also those volunteers who are then, let's say, kind of a surge capacity. If we need more people all of a sudden, then we can ask them to join us and to help us out. We also deploy people to the field, as I explained, and here you can see our founder, Maarten van der Veen. And we use then also sometimes new technologies like drone imagery, so that we can assess the damage before and after, for example, the cyclone. And here is where then data analytics comes in as well. Emergency responders need to know immediately where are the people in need and how bad is the situation. So how this is normally done is that we wait till teams are going into the field and they do, let's say, a survey, but often this is impossible. And well, you can see a clear example on the right, where it can take really a long time before you can be in the field. So another thing we can do is manually check satellite imagery from before and after the disaster, and then start comparing what is the damage. But what we have been working on as well is to use deep learning. So here you can see an example of a satellite image from before a tornado and after a tornado, and before and after a flood. And then on the right, you can see the damage labels that a deep learning model can attach or assign to each individual building. So yeah, this is used convolutional neural network, and this could be a talk on its own to explain how this works. But yeah, this is now what we are also operationalizing. The accuracy is not perfect, but this kind of information can be made available really fast. So as a first estimate, it's useful. And then we can wait for the more detailed assessments from the teams that go to the field. So that was the example I wanted to show from emergency support. And now I will then move to anticipatory action. So the current situation in the humanitarian field is that, we actually wait till the shit hits the fan, let's say. We wait till the disaster happens, and then there is funding available. There is also, for example, in the UN, the Central Emergency Response Fund. And there are all mechanisms, also sometimes in country, like in the Philippines, the government has money only for when the disaster has happened. But we all know, or there is at least, let's say, a lot of research that shows that if you take preventive measures, of course, in the end, it's better for everybody, and it's also very cost effective. So what if we could have a trigger level that we could use to release humanitarian funding and execute early actions, for example, 72 hours before a disaster strikes, like a typhoon. But for such a trigger level to become available, we need to be able to forecast which areas and people will be most impacted. And here you can see also an example on this picture. That's then in the Philippines, the model we are operating right now. The houses are then being strengthened with ropes 3 days before a typhoon makes landfall. So this is, let's say, the basic idea. But then the data science behind it is that we have to develop a trigger. And here you can see 5 steps that we then usually take to develop these triggers. And we do this for different types of natural hazards. So we have been working on droughts, floods, tropical cyclones, cold waves. You can name them, but we try really for those hazards where there is a lot of humanitarian impact to make these triggers. And this is kind of the menu that we follow. Because of the time, I will now not discuss the step 2, let's say the inventory of forecast, because that's basically a kind of an assessment of the different weather forecasts that are available from different weather agencies. And then we try to find the best weather forecast. But all the other steps I will briefly explain now. So the first step is that we try to better understand risk in general for the people, in for example, the Philippines. Risk is defined as hazard and exposure. So exposure, for example, where are the people living, where are the houses? The vulnerability, this can be physical and social vulnerability. So physical vulnerability is, for example, the quality of their house, and social vulnerability has to do with their poverty. And then in the end, the coping capacity. For example, what is their access to healthcare? And this is kind of the general or, let's say background information that we need to know. And for this, we have been developing dashboards that you can see here for different countries around the world. We have been, let's say, collecting this secondary data, and we make this available to these different Red Cross national societies. But the problem that we encounter here is that if we look at these different risk dimensions and these indicators, so I could pick one. So for example, children under 5 years old, that tells us something about the vulnerability of a certain area in a country. This information is often available at the district level. But if we go here on the right to, let's say, the village level, this is an example from Malawi, then at this lower spatial granularity, this information is not available. So what do we then try to do? We try to expand the data on these different risk indicators by, for example, organizing mapathons. So we ask a bunch of people to help us. They get Coke and pizza as well. And then they trace on kind of a satellite image, they trace the building and roads. So here you can see for Malawi that we had in October 2016, 38,000 buildings. But then after this mapathon, we had 3 times as much of those buildings and roads mapped. But still, this is of course many pizza sessions that we had to organize. You have to do quality checks. So it's, let's say, hard work. So again, here we can see if data analytics can be brought in. And yeah, what we have been doing, but actually by now also Google is working on this and Microsoft. They have, for example, something that's called Open Building. So this is now also becoming available online. You can automatically delineate buildings on the satellite imagery and also try to classify the material of the roof. But you need for this high resolution imagery actually, and also quite some computing power. But yeah, this is something we are working on. And also, so the Microsoft and Google have now, for some areas, this data available. So if you're still following me, I discussed a little bit step 1, that was the risk part. I skipped step 2, that was this forecast inventory. So now we go to step 3, is that we need actually a historical database of the impact. Because later on, if we try to model what the impact will be, we use information on historical events to train, for example, a machine learning model. So we need actually a database like this. This is an example for Zambia. For at least maybe 10 or 15 years, we need impact data from different sources. But if we take this from the data sources that are available, we are nearly always missing data with sufficient spatial and temporal resolution. And impact data here, you can think about people affected, houses damaged, livelihood impacts, and so on. So what can we do then with, let's say, text mining? And actually, yeah, we did also research on this with Annelies Riesebos a few years ago. But yeah, what we have been doing is to scrape the web for digital media. And then we use natural language processing to extract impact data from newspaper articles. So what I try to show here with this graph is that in blue, you see impact data from, well, Desinventar and MDOT. These are like kind of official databases. And then in orange, you can see additional information that we can find from these newspaper articles. So you can see that in some cases it can help because it gives us more information, additional information. And on the left, you can also see that it sometimes gives us information about different areas of the country. Because at the bottom, you can see the data coming from these official sources. And at the top, and this is for Uganda, you see that we have other areas where the newspaper articles are giving us information. And actually, we are now diving into this deeper with a collaboration already through ABW. So also with Claudia sitting over there. She's helping us and master thesis student Hannah Bailon. And we're going to go one step further. We try to see if we can use text mining to detect flash and river floods and extract the impact data and also identify the most trustworthy newspapers. So actually the idea Hannah and Claudia came up with was to use Twitter to search the newspapers, because the newspapers online, it's sometimes more difficult to scrape them because there's also all kind of commercials in between the text, whereas the tweet contains a URL to the article with a precise information. So that's kind of the first step with which we could find 5 national quality newspapers. You can see them here on the top. This is an example from Malawi. And in that way, tweets are extracted and the tweets are sorted with relevant keywords, and then URLs to the articles are extracted. And in the end, could identify 132 relevant articles for floods in 2019. And then, 4 types of analysis can be done. So I will explain that actually on the next slide. So the first type of analysis was keyword detection. And most keywords in these articles were around the human aspect. So the people, the victims, and the households. And that's also the word cloud that you see here on the right. Then the entity extraction, geopolitical entities that refers to, for example, administrative units in the country. And the locations, they are mainly emphasized in the reports that we can see here, the word cloud at the bottom. And then also, let's say quite new, is that Claudia and Hannah did sentiment analysis. And for floods, that showed a quite neutral tone in reporting. So it was also more or less objective. And will be interesting at some point that we do this as an analysis as well for floods in conflict-affected countries, because then it might shift. And a frame analysis was done. So frame analysis, that means like, what is kind of the main way in which the newspaper article communicates about the floods? Is it an economic frame or is it more human frame? And maybe not surprisingly, actually these 2, human frame and the economic frame, were also the ones that were used mostly to cover the floods. And again, we could also map the locations, of course, so that we can later on compare this to these official impact data sources. So the goal in the end is then to complement these sources in black, these official impact data sources, with the information from the digital media. So it can be used, but we still have to be careful because this fusion of these different data sources has to be done with care, because there will be biases in the newspaper articles, but also maybe actually in the official database. And there is the risk of duplication. Let me also see time-wise. Oops. Well, I have to still one step and then the conclusion. So, if you remember, now I talked about these 3 first steps. The first steps, or the 4th step, I have to say, is when we start mixing everything. So this is the cooking step. And here you can see the composite index approach. That is actually the most simple approach. So we use the information we got from step 1, the risk analysis. So for example, from step 1, we know the houses that are in flood-prone areas. We know something about poverty. We use information from this step 2, which was the inventory of the forecast. So we take the best possible forecast, in this case for a flood event. that we plot as well. And we put, for example, on top, the area where the Red Cross is active, the deployment area. And this is what is being done in Bangladesh. There they have a cyclone early action protocol. And what they basically do is 48 hours before a cyclone arrives, they do this, let's say, mixing of the exposure and vulnerability map with the forecast of this cyclone, the map here in the middle, and then they get a priority map that you can see on the right. And this is really used in practice to release funding. You can see here the amount in Swiss francs, like 180,000 Swiss francs can then be really, in a few hours, be released, and early actions can be started to, for example, evacuate people in this case. But yeah, we can do this modeling a bit more accurately as well. So for example, in Malawi, we have been working on identifying more closely the physical vulnerability of houses. So here you can see 3 types of houses on the left: traditional, semi-permanent, and permanent. And what we actually did is we used a UAV imagery or drone imagery, and also mapillary imagery. So that's imagery where a Red Cross volunteer was driving around on a motorbike. Yeah, you can maybe just see a little bit the motorbike in the middle of this image. And he had a GoPro camera on his head. So in that way, we got imagery also of the wall material of the houses. So we had roof material from the drone imagery, wall material, and then also still some survey data. And that all that, let's say, heterogeneous data we could combine to create a physical vulnerability map of the different houses. And then, let's say, a more advanced way of modeling is then that we put on top of this detailed information per house a map that shows the flood extent. That's the map here in the middle. And we use then a flood damage curve that shows the damage as a relation or in relation to the water depth. So then for each building, you can say, okay, the water height around this house is like 50 centimeters. So we can calculate from the damage curve how much damage this individual house will have. So this is a really detailed way of doing the calculations, but still a fairly simple way of modeling. So if Robert allows me, I will just show still our, let's say, Rolls-Royce in terms of modeling. That's the statistical modeling that we're doing. And here we use XGBoost, certain machine learning algorithm. And we mix different predictors. So the predictors you can see here on the left. Again, physical vulnerability, social vulnerability, and exposure with hazard information that goes into the machine learning model. Those are the predictors. And then what we try to predict is the damage to the houses. And what we then, let's say, send to the Philippine Red Cross every 6 hours, actually, are maps like this, where you see the damage per municipality. So dark red is that there will be a lot of damage, and lighter color is that there is less damage. And you can see also this line, that is the typhoon track. And this information they get then 72 hours before, and then they have to decide, are we going to take early action, yes or no? The problem that I maybe want to show here shortly is that this forecast skill of the weather information is actually very important, because you can see the track is still shifting a lot. And yeah, that's not something our machine learning model can solve. This is because we get this weather information from, for example, American Weather Agency. Yeah, and we cannot improve that part. But this is operationalized and has been used since 2019. And then actually also the UN is now using this model in the Philippines to trigger early actions. So in view of the time, I will not go into detail in let's say, how we operationalize this, but yeah, this is all automated, let's say. So yeah, to conclude, yeah, I started with these transitions at the global level, more climate extremes, more disasters, the digital and data revolution. That led us to start up, let's say, 510. There are still challenges when we want to use data analytics. Data scarcity, I mentioned a few times, like, for example, high resolution satellite imagery or the impact data that is missing. The digital divide, I did not discuss that much about it, but yeah, we are trying to build also capacity with the Red Cross national societies in country, and we start there at the leadership level. And also explainability and usability is something we are looking into right now, because there's nice fancy algorithms. If the people cannot really understand it, then sometimes the adoption is also lower. And finally, there are many opportunities to close some of these gaps and challenges. So we use the big and small data across the disaster risk management cycle, but we try really to build this local data capacity and make sure that we put the user first. So we use human-centered design to build an accountability and to work transdisciplinary. And that brings me to my last slide. So yeah, let's work together to make the world a better place. Thanks.
Questions? And then I'm going to pick up the guys from upstairs for the wrap-up together. But
may I ask a question, maybe? Regarding that part on the Mapathon, the slide where you describe your Mapathons with pizza and cola, it started with a picture of the situation that you could get out of OpenStreetMaps and the situation that you have produced after a lot of cola and pizza. Well, it looked like much better, of course. And the question I like to ask is whether you also uploaded that to the OpenStreetMap repository.
Yes, yeah, that's actually then, OpenStreetMap has also a process to validate the outcome of a mapathon. So I think at least 3 mappers have to kind of map in the same way, and then it's uploaded to the.
But you contributed to it.
Yes, yeah.
And then, if I may just follow up, you mentioned that both Google and Microsoft, that's probably here, they are also producing and mapping those areas. But I wonder what is the incentive for them, because here is probably pursuing like commercial benefits from mapping. Why are they mapping that? Because they probably don't get a lot of commercial returns, right?
Yeah, you have google.org. So it's also the, let's say, corporate social responsibility arm of Google. Then again, I don't know if they're only doing this for philanthropic reasons.
Yeah, I expect more philanthropy from Google than from Microsoft. Maybe I'm biased.
That I would not know for sure.
Okay, but they are already improving.
I think that you can have many applications of this, of course, also in commercial sense.
Sure. It's a chicken egg problem. If the data is there, then you can explore it.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a question over there, maybe?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I would like to comment from a Microsoft point of view. From a Microsoft research perspective, for example, the satellite imagery is very important because they're ambitious in food genomics, is, for example, to really enhance in the agricultural phase and to make sure that we get sustainable nutrition by 2050. So then, for example, that's something that they also open source, but it also benefits to the larger goal to feed the world, for example.
Great, thank you.
That's a small comment.
Great.
We need a little more questions for the guys upstairs to.
Thank you for your presentation, Mark. I think I was triggered by one of your final conclusions, or I would say more like opportunities to move on, which was about the human-centered design part. I also know that 510 is doing some participatory approaches in the way you engage communities as well. And I think also mapping out how the local context is working. But I was wondering, in the phase of modeling and also like running these expectations, what role could there be for more human-centered design? So involving more local participation in getting more concrete outcomes and better modeling.
Yeah. I did not include so much information about the work we are doing here, just because of time restraints, let's say. But we have, I could say really like almost a team of people that are working now on human-centered design, or we also sometimes call it community engagement and accountability. That is also, that's part of the way of working of the Red Cross. And it's at different levels, I would say. So for example, the type of early actions that are chosen, that is also always done based on consultation or involvement of the communities that are affected by, for example, these typhoons. So we try to find out what are already kind of the early actions that they are taking themselves, and how can we support them in doing that, let's say, better or more, if they have some, for example, additional funding. So that's one way in the design of the anticipatory action, let's say. Then we also create some products like dashboards or apps. And then we use human-centered design to make sure that we build the product according to the user requirements. And so we use this like if the product has to be viable, financially sustainable, and technically feasible. So then we use it more to develop the product, let's say. And the other, then it also relates to accountability, and that's a bit tricky, I have to say, for example, the machine learning model in the Philippines. There I have to admit, we do not really involve the community in, let's say, developing or scrutinizing the machine learning model. But we are looking into, let's say, the accountability for this machine learning algorithm. Because if it predicts the wrong municipality or the wrong area to intervene, then of course I would say the community or beneficiaries could say, hey, why were we not supported? So this requires a level of accountability of the algorithm, and who's then responsible? Is that then the 510 machine learning algorithm developer, or is that the Philippine Red Cross that is using this algorithm? Or those are kind of questions that I think, especially if this is going to be scaled up, then these questions become really more and more important.
Right. But I think from your presentation, I understood that the final decision-making level is at the country department that is receiving the information.
That's right.
And then they would act accordingly and make decisions if these are enough triggers to make a decision to intervene in that region.
Yes.
Okay.
And then it's partly, let's say, human in the machine, human in the loop, and partly out of the loop. Because, for example, the decision on which municipality to intervene, that's then done using the machine learning algorithm. But then within the municipality, there are local barangay committees, it's called, local groups of local government people, and they decide on which household then to help.
Well, given that Robert needs questions, you just triggered curiosity. This accountability thing, I find it a fascinating topic. And does the 510 get like legal support? And is there legal support equipped to assist you on these type of things? Are people that do law equipped to think with you about these things of digital accountability?
No, now we have support from academic side. So at ITC, the University of Twente, there is a researcher, Caroline Gebhardt. She has a VENI grant, and she's looking into this together with us. So yeah, we call it also, let's say, we're auditing our geointelligence workflow as well. Okay. So part is the accountability, but partly we're also looking into biases in our algorithm. Representation bias, measurement bias, for example, that can all happen, or aggregation bias in the different steps that we take to make this model. So yeah, we're also looking into that part. But no, not really, that's really legal support, not yet.
Just before we went to the two parallel sessions in the, let's say, the plenary part before, there was also a question about, let's say, the political power and how we are going to support them. Of course, that politically we take decisions, like we implement GDPR, we implement a lot of laws, and they are somewhere. But of course, that the deciding to do something is not the same as being able to do it. So I guess that you are pioneering this, right? Pioneering this.
Yeah, these are pilot phases. Although, like for example, the Philippines, I mentioned, we have this, or in Bangladesh, these budgets of 200,000 Swiss francs to then do these early actions. But now the UN has come in and they're using our algorithm, and they have 8 million euros. So it's scaling up.
That helps, yeah.
That helps, and it's scaling up. But yeah, the legal aspects are still
lagging behind. So maybe we should teach lawyers, Mark.
Yeah. We also have the law department in. Yeah.
So thank you, very interesting. I'm wondering whether if you have seen a shift in, of course, we know the human in the loop and they make the last decision, but have you seen it changing over time? Are people less, or maybe governments less reluctant to, this is very useful for you technically and also for early warning, but have you seen it applied really after you warn them, whether it's being more adopted?
Yeah, we see this shift happening in the Philippines. The government was until now quite reluctant. This had also to do with that they have actually like a mandate, so it's not an official law, but still a kind of a government regulation that says that local government units have to act early if they have scientific information that humanitarian impact will be happening. And then they have to act before the typhoon makes landfall. And until now, the official weather agency in the Philippines, PAGASA, is not giving those impact-based forecasts, we call it. So they give the weather forecast, but they don't give the information about what the weather will do. So they only tell what the weather will be, but they don't tell what the weather will do. Because if they do that, then the local government units also, they have to act. And yeah, there's some reluctancy there, and they're not sure yet which model to use. So we have been talking to the weather agency in the Philippines during the last 4 or 5 years. And now slowly, and maybe also because
because of the United Nations.
United Nations are coming with more money. So now slowly...
Not only with more money, but also with somebody that seems to believe in you, right?
Yes, that's right. Yes. Yeah, more momentum.
Yeah.
And now they are going, I think they are almost happening there, let's say. And the World Meteorological Organization is actually trying to push met agencies around the world to go into this direction.
Does your model also, can it deal with other regions of the globe, or are there things about the Philippines that make it well equipped to deal with that? Like are the typhoons very predictable, very regular over there? And is there something specific about the Philippines?
Very nice question. Actually, you and OCHA now managed to get some funds, so we're now going to collaborate with them to see if we can scale up our model and make it global.
Okay.
But yeah, there are certain elements of the model that we can make global, like some of the predictors. If it's like poverty, for example, then we can use global databases for. There are parts that we can make global and easily replicable. And also some of the weather forecasts from the European Center of Microwave Frequencies, for example, they give forecasts for the whole world. So also that part we can make global. But yeah, we have to see. It's a research project that we're now starting.
There's one question in the...
Any more questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. I found it really inspiring. Super cool. We've mainly been talking about the data and the models, but I was also wondering, how did this all start? Because you started 5 years ago with this initiative, 6. I'm running a bit behind. How did you get the trust from the organization, and do you know how this went?
Yeah.
Because I think any NGO and any organization would do cool things like this, but I think in practice it's always a bit hard to get to this level.
Yeah. Well, I think what was important that we had somebody who really went for it, let's say. So yeah, Maarten van der Veen started it, and well, I joined a few months later, let's say. But he got also the support from the international humanitarian department head in the Red Cross to kind of experiment with this. So it started also small. The think big and start small. So there was this big vision, but we started small, just with 2-3 people, and quite quickly actually we had volunteers. So that worked really well, and master thesis students. So initially I think we had more volunteers and students than staff. And then we started even building like this model, and we just started doing things, and then we also managed to get more funding, and it was like a snowball. Started growing.
Can I ask you a question too? Okay.
Last one.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And this is Ebru, I'm in online. Okay, so my question is, for what other type of disaster you can think of a triggering point other than typhoons? Have you thought about it?
Yeah, good question. Well, actually, for natural hazards, we sometimes make a kind of a grouping. For example, an earthquake cannot yet be predicted. Maybe a few days ahead, but not like a few days ahead. So, for example, earthquakes, it's not possible to do anticipatory action. And then we have this group of sudden onset disasters like floods and tropical cyclones. And there, we can use anticipatory action. And then also for slow onset disasters like drought, we are working on this. And apart from natural hazards, there are also people that are working, of course, on conflict early warning systems, but that's really a political and contentious area. So we are not working on that.
Right. Okay. Thanks also for answering all the questions that were extra.
I think I need to slide one more slide, Gerber, just as a
slide.
Yeah, there's one with all the links and the. Oh no. I just read. Okay, well, first off, I really want to thank our speakers. So Eliane, Mark, Joris, we're gonna send the gift to you because we cannot hand it to you. Tinka, am I forgetting somebody? Parvati, and Kai also online. So I'm not sure where the presents are, Sidonie, or I will get them to you during the drinks. The drinks are going to be in the second floor where we just were. So that's going to be the same. As already shared, so you can contact us at hello@analyticsbw.org, our website to join our meetups and join our community. So the website is brand new. We're also looking for feedback on the website because, well, it is Femke already promised, so I'm really happy with that. To improve it. Also, if you have content that you would like to share on the website, also really interesting for us to distribute and teach people. We're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn. The links are there, and will also be in the follow-up mail. And it was just it was a really inspirational day for me to be in. I hope it was for you as well, and I hope to continue during the drinks. And well, recordings and insights will also be shared. Sidonie. Yeah, Sidonie. I'm not sure where she is, but Sidonie is behind the scenes again now as well, and she was really a big help for us. Yeah.
We have learned from Eliane that innovation comes after the drinks.
Yeah, so now we're going to go.
Yeah.
Yes. Cheers. I'm already short, right?
Awesome. Great. Thanks. Have a great.